And good afternoon. Welcome to Blue with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590. Thank you for making us part of your day. My next guest is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County, Sheriff Joe Bryant. Sheriff, welcome to the booth.
Thank you for having me, Darren. I appreciate it.
Sheriff, tell the listeners a little bit about Joe Bryant for those who don't know Joe Bryant.
I've been in law enforcement since the summer of 1988. I got out of the Navy in January of 87. I took a job doing construction. And then I started driving. I drove a truck for Helena Chemical in the summer of '88, and just delivering things all over southeast Missouri, northeast Arkansas. And then I was approached and asked to take a job as a part-time dispatcher on weekends, and I took that, and it went from there. Mr. Charles Albert Ferris came to me and asked me. I knew him. He was from the Braggadocio area where I was from, and he asked me, and it started from there part-time.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pima County, the newly elected sheriff, but not unfamiliar with law enforcement, as is obvious. He's been in law enforcement since 1988. Sheriff, you indicated you were in the Navy. How long were you in the Navy?
I was in for 4 years, from 83 to 87. I graduated in May of 82 from Delta C7. I joined, then they had what they called the delayed entry program, so I actually left in January. Went to boot camp in Great Lakes, which was a mistake in January.
I have some friends who went to boot camp in Great Lakes, and they say that it's a little bit chilly that time of year at Great Lakes. What would you say the average temperature was, negative 20?
Well, it was probably a warm day. It was probably in the 30s. But our barracks was really warm. We had those old radiator heaters. They were so warm, they had to keep every other window open in the barracks. Unless, of course, our company commander, he kept threatening us. If we kept screwing up, he said, I'm going to make you do the rain dance. We didn't know what that was, so we screwed up pretty bad one day. So he brought us in there and said, close all the windows, and it got really hot in there. He said, push all your racks back. And he commenced on us, and when we got through, there was a puddle of sweat under all of us, and water was dripping off the ceilings. And he said, that's the rain dance, gentlemen. Don't cross me no more. And that's how we learned that. And
again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pima County, talking about his early time there in the Navy. Sheriff, after you graduated Great Lakes, you indicated you were in for 4 years. What was your service area? Where did you get stationed?
I first went to Millington, actually, at a naval air station there. I was in the aviation part. I was an aviation ordnanceman. I was in an ASW helicopter squadron, anti-submarine warfare helicopter squadron. Of course, we did a lot of things besides that. We delivered cargo personnel, flew plane guard, which is every launch. Our birds would fly off the port side of the ship in case a pilot had to ditch or something. They would rescue him.
And tell me a little bit about that experience. I mean, I think you were, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, first time you ever left Braggadocio, I would think, maybe, or something like that. Did you really grow up at that time?
Well, somewhat I did. I don't think a man gets mature till he's about 35. But yeah, you do grow up in there a lot. You learn responsibility. You're responsible for what you do, and they make you that way. They told us there's two ways of doing things here, the Navy way and the Navy way. Pick one. The first time we deployed, I was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. We had to deploy to Norfolk, Virginia, to the USS Independence. They pulled us up there on the bus. We flew up there, and they put us on the bus and pulled up in the dock. Well, where's the ship? They said, it's right there. It's that big gray wall right there. Of course, an aircraft carrier has a complement of 5,000, including the air wing. So, yeah, it was an experience. But it was hard work. It was tough work, but we were young. We could handle it.
And you indicated, were you actually stationed on an aircraft carrier?
No, I was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, at the ASW base there. We had helicopters and fixed wings there. We would actually deploy to the ship. And 2 deployments on the Independence and 1 on the Forrestal, which was stationed in Jacksonville.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County, recently elected, but longtime member of law enforcement, well-known in the community and well-respected. Sheriff, you indicated that you were in the Navy for 4 years, and I've talked to a lot of people. Do you think, and again, I value your opinion, that's why I'm asking you this, do you think that we would benefit if more of the 18, 19, 20-year-old men and women in the United States were forced to do 2 years of military service?
I'm both ways about that. It would be good in some ways. I'm not familiar with the military now as to what it was then. It was tougher then. They were harder on us. But I mean, like I say, we were young, we were tough, we could handle it back then. It has been said in the past that a drafted military is the worst military you want to go against, because they want to get it over with and come back home. So yeah, it's not for everyone. The military is not for everyone. It's for. When I joined the military, it may sound corny, but I felt like I needed to do that. I was obligated to do something for my country. That's why I did that. I didn't do it because I didn't have nothing else to do. My dad told me, I'll send you to college and pay for it. And I said, no, I want to do this. So I went and did. They had options to help pay for college. I never took that. I've never been to college a day in my life. But it was something I wanted to do. I wanted to give back.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pimacott County, recently elected in January. You became the sheriff, is that correct, of this year?
It is. I served as Chief Deputy under Sheriff Greenwell for 28 years.
Were you the Chief Deputy for 28 years?
I was. I'm a patient man.
And, anybody that works for Sheriff Greenwell is a very patient man. I'm just kidding. Sheriff Greenwell is one of the finest men I've ever known in my life. Really appreciated Sheriff Greenwell. Extremely excited that you took over after Sheriff Greenwell. Sheriff, kind of explain, you indicated you were a dispatcher part-time there back in 1988. How did you kind of work up the ranks of law enforcement and decide, you were driving that truck and you said you were going to kind of segue. I know that you talked about your military career and felt like you needed to give back. Did you kind of feel the same way in regards to law enforcement? You want to kind of give back to your community?
Probably not exactly that way, but it turned out to be the best option for me at that time. I worked part-time, then I got a job working I started under Clyde Orton. Older folks will remember.
I've heard stories of Sheriff Orton.
Sheriff Orton. Then I worked for Jack Davis. I went to the academy and got my training, became a certified police officer. Worked for him for about 4 years, obtained the rank of sergeant, left there and went to work for the city of Hayti. Worked there for 4 years. Sheriff Greenwell, after he got elected, he asked me to be his chief deputy, and I went to work for him. Started January 1st, 1997. And worked there for 7 terms with him. So
is it my understanding that you were the only chief deputy that Sheriff Greenwell ever had?
I am.
I wasn't aware of that. That's impressive. I did not know that. And I don't know why I didn't know that. Of course, I started practicing law in about 2001, and Sheriff Greenwell, and you were already in office at that point. But again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Joe Bryant, Sheriff of Pimacott County, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pimacott County. Sheriff, you've been in law enforcement a long time, and we've talked a lot. One thing I will say about law enforcement, I think there are 2 areas that are extremely underpaid. The first is teachers, and the second is first responders and law enforcement. I don't understand how municipalities and cities can think that they can pay law enforcement minimum wage or just above and expect quality service because these guys are on, they're doing very, very dangerous stuff daily. How do you cope with that?
Well, in our county, I understand what you're saying. I do. I get it. But we're not a wealthy county, and they do. And I have a good working relationship with our county commissioners, and I try to work with them. And naturally, in my first budget process last year, I did ask for raises, and I got some raised, but we do have budget constraints. But that's something we constantly work on, trying to improve that. Of course, marijuana became legal, and they opened the stores, and the county was getting a good bit of money from that, and then that was taken away from the county because of a ruling of the Supreme Court that only the governmental entity that they were located in could collect those taxes. So that ended up costing our county a good deal of money. But it is something we're working on, and you are correct. There's no one aspect of law enforcement, in my opinion. Some people may disagree with me. that's more important than the other. The dispatchers are your lifeline. Whenever you call, if you need an ambulance, if there's been a bad accident, a house is on fire, or someone's been seriously assaulted, they are your lifeline, and they're busy and they do a good job. And of course, the jail staff, a street officer will have to deal with someone a limited amount of time, and then they bring them to jail, and the jailer has to deal with them sometimes for years, until they get through the system. So, and it's all day, every day for the jail staff. So, like I say, there is no one aspect of law enforcement that's more crucial than the other. It's the system that we have, and it's the one we have to deal with, and they all need to be paid more. Being a jailer is the worst job in law enforcement.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima-Scott County. And Sheriff, every time I go to Pima-Scott County, I'm always impressed by your staff. And one of the battles that we're having in this area, a lot of these folks who are an outstanding jailer, dispatcher, sheriff, they realize, hey, we can go over to the steel mill or something like that and make a ton more money and not have to deal with these folks. So that's a constant battle. One thing I was thinking of is, and of course the county commissions and the cities wouldn't like this, but the state legislature came in and said, hey, we're going to minimum mandatory $40,000 per year for teachers. I don't know why they don't look into something like that for law enforcement. I mean, I don't, it just baffles me that we kind of leave them behind in regards to what they should be paid. And I know that your philosophy is you deal with the county commission and you do best you can with what you have. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on any of that, because I think you agree that clearly law enforcement needs to be paid more. But like you say, we have budget constraints and we have things of that nature. So, Sheriff, let's talk a little bit about something. How did you deal with Tommy Greenwell for 28 years?
Well, it was tough at times, I'll tell you that. Like I said, I'm a patient man. But no, I enjoyed working for him. He's a smart man. He's my mentor. He comes around the office quite a bit, and sometimes I bounce things off of him, get his opinion on how I should handle something and do something, how I should go about it and stuff. Tommy's more of a people person than I am. He's the gift of gab, and everybody likes him that knows him, gets to know him and stuff. He's good. He's good at that. But he always had a sharp mind when dealing with issues, money issues. So that's someone that I like to keep him close to me. I talk to him quite a bit about things. He's my mentor.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pima-Scott County, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima-Scott County. Been in law enforcement since about 1988. Started as a part-time dispatcher, worked his way up the ranks. Sheriff, I did not realize that at one point you worked at a municipality in Hayti. Kind of explain to us the difference between being at a municipality and being countywide. Did you feel more constrained, or did you enjoy it more, or did you enjoy it less? How did you look at that?
I did enjoy it. We worked 11-hour shifts. Hayti gets mighty small in 11 hours, sometimes, but we were kind of busy. There was always something to keep us jumping. Working as and we would go out and assist if a county deputy had a problem or a trooper or anything, we would go assist them. I mean, there's no question about that. And we enjoy a good working relationship with the cities. We assist them whenever something happens. We respond to accidents and help do what we can there, fires in the county, anything of that nature. But we all enjoy a good working relationship. And you have, especially in a rural area where, you don't have a lot of officers and stuff. So we try to work together. And the sheriff's office, if there's something major happens, a homicide, for instance, we always help with that. Crothersville's pretty good at taking care of their own. Some of the other cities are shorthanded, and we help do that. And we always anything major like that happens, we call the Highway Patrol, the Division of Drug and Crime Control. They have very good investigators, and they got more assets, so it just makes sense to call them. We enjoy a good working relationship with them. They're great. They do a great job, and they bring a lot to the table that, like we were talking about money-wise, things we just don't have available to us. So that they are an excellent asset.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County. And Sheriff, I failed to ask you this, and I think I know the answer to this, but who's currently serving as your chief deputy?
Josh Boss is my chief deputy. He's got a lot of years. He was a jail administrator for a while. He's pretty knowledgeable about the way everything works in the sheriff's office, the jail, the road. He's done it all. So he was the logical choice for that.
And, in talking about Sheriff Greenwell was the sheriff for a long time. And he always told me, he said, Darren, he didn't exactly use that word. He used some other words, but we're not going to put those on the air. He said, Darren, I would continue to be sheriff if it was not for having to run that jail.
The jail is a problem. That's where most of your issues come from, is the jail, dealing with the inmates, dealing with their families. Something happens to an inmate, or, they have an accident, trip, fall, get into a fight, things that happen every day out in everyday life. But we at the sheriff's office are responsible for all that, and it's aggravating at times to have to deal with it.
And like you say, a lot of people say, well, I check in 8 to 5 and then I kind of am done. As sheriff in charge of that jail, it's 24/7, 365. There's no holidays. There's no days off. There's not even an hour off, not a minute off, in which you're not constantly supervising somebody, watching somebody, or having some kind of things going on. Currently, how many road deputies do you have over in Pima County, Sheriff?
We have 8 now, including our investigators. We have some real good investigators. They pitch in and help cover the shifts and do those things. I have a good crew. My investigators are really good. I pretty much, they keep me in the loop about what's happening, what's going on. If I have any input, I'll have some say in it. But I trust them. They're good. They're experienced. They know what they're doing. So I let them have their lead, and I know what's going on, but I let them. They know what they're doing. They know how to do it.
And again, it's almost a situation, Sheriff. And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590. If you're going to hire people and put them in positions like investigator, things of that nature, you kind of have to let them have a little authority to be able to pursue and not micromanage to the point where they're, otherwise you should be doing it all, correct? Isn't that kind of your management style?
That's right. I'm the sheriff, but I have deputies, and the deputies are assigned jobs and tasks. And I trust them. They know what they're doing, and they're very good at it. They got a lot of experience. Pima County is a small rural county, but we've had it all there.
And again, that's one thing. Pima County is a very unique county, as we had indicated. It somewhat on the poverty level. It also has a major interstate that goes through it, so you have constantly people going up and down the interstate who are moving large amounts of illegal narcotics, allegedly, at some point. There's also a lot of stuff going on over there. But one thing is, I've always been impressed, the cities and the counties always very proactive in, for instance, the cameras on the stoplights, the license plate readers, and things of that nature. All things that for a county of that size and cities of those size, you wouldn't expect that in Pima County. But you guys have some of that stuff, correct?
We do. In some areas we're lacking, but we've learned through the years that the camera is an excellent investigative tool. It's a big help, and I always encourage people, even at your house, put up a camera. Because sometimes we've done that. We go to people's houses when something happens in an area. The investigators will go there and say, hey, you got a camera? Can I look at it? They look at it, and they may find something that helps in the investigation. Something that may change, whether you can solve it or maybe you can't solve it, or figure out which way someone went, what kind of vehicle they were in. So, yeah, that's something that we do, and we're trying to enlarge that now, put them in areas where we don't have them, because it's just a great asset for us.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County. And Sheriff, you've been in this since 1988. I'm going to ask you a question that you're going to be able to say, well, I don't know if I can answer this or not. How has law enforcement changed since you first started being a dispatcher back in 1988?
Technology's grown a lot. We have cameras in the jail that also record. Watch the camera. Talking about cameras again. Tasers, not to be violent, but that's a non-lethal weapon, and that's actually a more passive way to get someone under control without having to engage them in fighting. But yeah, technology, radars, the radio communications, we can communicate 100 miles away now, with the radio systems that we have. Of course, the vehicles have changed through the years and all the equipment that we use. When I first started, I started with a revolver, but that's how old I am. But anyway, now we've gone to handguns and shotguns, and now we have rifles that we use also. Technology is the main thing that's changed. And with technology, get back to the money issue with technology, a lot of this stuff for a county like ours, it's hard for us to get those things. I mean, we have progressed a lot, but there are a lot of nice things out there you see, but, it's just beyond our financial ability to have some of those things.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima-Scott County, talking a lot about the change in law enforcement since he started as a part-time dispatcher back in 1988. And Sheriff, one thing about Pima-Scott County, much like Dunklin County, it's a large landmass to try to cover with, 8 road deputies and some investigators. So, that's why you kind of say, if you are living in the rural areas or even in your cities, put up some cameras, put up some, and people say, well, I don't know if I really want to. In the long run, it's going to pay off because, like you say, it's hard for somebody to deny that they're in your house when there's a picture of them on a surveillance camera, correct?
That is exactly right. And we're not out to get John Q. Citizen. We're not out to mess with you. We are looking to solve crimes with these cameras. We're looking for the bad guys. We're trying to get them. We're not trying to pick on nobody, or we don't want to invade your privacy. Believe me, we don't. We got enough to do without that. So yeah, that's why I encourage that. And I want people to know, if we put them up and some cameras can read license plates, we're not after you just driving down the interstate. We're looking for people that have committed crimes.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pima-Scott County, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer. Sheriff, and back when you were running, one thing that always stuck with me, we went to I think it was a Lincoln Days or some kind of event at the Elk Chute Lodge, and you gave a speech. As you say, you're not a big people person as far as Sheriff Greenwell, but you're very well known, very well liked. And you got up there and you said one thing, and the room kind of went quiet because it was the most effective speech I've ever heard a politician ever give. It was, hello, my name is Joe Bryant, and I can tell you one thing. If I'm elected sheriff, I'll be honest and I'll be fair. And then the room just kind of said, well, you know what? That's the man for the job. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I learned that from Sheriff Greenwell. It is what it is. When it happens, it happens. If you do something wrong, you did something wrong, or someone in your family or a friend did something wrong. I like to say, we're not out to get everybody. If you have someone that did something minor, hey, we'll work with you on that. I don't want to take some young person and ruin their life over some minor issue. As long as they'll straighten up, and the prosecution can help with that too. Give them a deferred prosecution. If you don't do anything else within 5 years, then this will go away. But we have to be honest with people. You have to be honest with people. I had an old sheriff tell me one time, you draw a lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And I believe that, but when I was younger, I was more hard-nosed than I am now. But as I've grown older and been in this more, I understand that people are what they are, and people do what they do. I have good relationships with people that have been in jail that I've arrested. I see them out on the street and Hey, how you doing? Glad you're doing better. I see someone that's doing better. I tell them, hey, man, I'm glad you're doing good. I know a young lady, she went through some very tough times. She was involved with drugs, and, she got herself straightened up, and I told her, I'm proud of you. And I am proud of her because I've seen a lot of that. In our profession, you've seen a lot of it. We see that, and it's not probably not a high percentage of them that do that. But when you see someone that does that, you're touched by that. You're glad. You're actually happy. In my career, you're glad to see somebody turn the page and go the right direction. I'm not no saint. I've done wrong things in my life, things I shouldn't have done. I gave we have a Tuesday morning prayer breakfast at the Temple Baptist in Crothersville, and I gave my testimony there a month or two ago. And you tell them all the heart-wrenching things. I told them when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I said, I ain't a saint. I ain't always been perfect. One time I was coming home from Crothersville, and I ran over a coon. I turned around in my truck. I went back and got it and threw it in the back of my truck. I'm from Braggadocia. I went down to Braggadocia to the post office. I probably shouldn't be telling this. But anyway, I took that coon out of the back of my truck, and I wrapped that chain around his tail on the flagpole, and I run him up the flagpole. Well, my grandma was the postmaster. My dad and my Uncle Bob were at home. She called in and told them, come get this coon down off this flagpole, and they did. When they came back, I was sitting at the bar eating my cereal. My dad and my uncle came in, and they were saying some rather ill things about the person that put that coon up on that flagpole. I just sat there and ate my cereal, and if I'd have said anything, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But I was home on leave from the Navy a couple of years later, and I went to my dad's house, and I said, I need to tell you something. And I was standing by the door with my hand on the handle. I said, I'm the one that put that coon up on that flagpole. He said, it's a good thing you're telling me that today, because if you told me that day, you probably wouldn't be standing here right now. So I'm not, I was mischievous. I got spankings when I was a senior in high school. People don't do it, but I did. I wasn't a criminal, but I was mischievous. So I kind of understand that about people. I'm a human, like anybody else.
And again, we're going to welcome the Loop with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County. And Sheriff, people are probably saying, why do you keep saying that you're talking to the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County? As the sheriff, you're in charge of all law enforcement activities in the entire county, correct?
If I wanted to be. If I chose to do that. That's a state statute that says the sheriff is the chief, but it doesn't give any definition beyond that. But no, we got plenty to do. And
you're telling me that the state legislature wrote a statute, didn't explain what they were. You're kidding, right?
That's as I understand it. Is the sheriff's the chief law enforcement officer of the county, but that's as far as that goes.
And it reminds me of kind of a funny story. And when we're in court, that Judge Copeland, anytime anyone was charged, I think they're failing to register or something like that. And he would always look to Tommy Greenwell and say, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pima County, Tommy Greenwell. And I just always thought that was kind of an interesting deal, didn't you?
Yeah, it always get a laugh out of us, People think we're all sticks in the mud, but we're not, Like you, I get along well with you. And people see movies and TV and they think cops and lawyers don't get along. I enjoy I worked in the courts, so I've pretty much always enjoyed a good good relationship with all the attorneys, get along, if we don't agree on something, we just don't agree. And, we don't yell and scream. And, it's not like you see in movies and TV. Like you had me here today and I was glad to come do it with you. I appreciate it.
And, that's one thing, Sheriff, is a lot of people don't realize that we're just doing the job that we're required to do. As attorneys, we do a job. As the sheriff and his law enforcement do a job. Some people look at it like, again, the relationship is, and I've always had an excellent relationship with everybody in Pima County. They've always, and even here in Dunklin County, I've always had a good relationship. But some people, kind of take it personally, and it's a job. And, that's kind of the way I look at it. Sheriff, as we're talking here, what are some of the things you're looking to do in the remainder of your term as Pima County? Is there some things that you came in and you're like, I know you're the chief deputy for 28 years for Sheriff Greenville. Is there some things that you kind of want to change up a little bit in your next 3 years or so?
Well, my primary goal is to get some extra personnel and some extra money for them. That's my main goal. There are some things technology-wise that I've looked at that I would like to do, but there are just financial restraints on that. There's a virtual reality training system that I familiarized myself at the sheriff's conference, and it's where you can build a scenario, an actual scenario using your people, and you put on these goggles, and you can actually be there in it and see it, and I think that would be an excellent training tool. Every agency does things differently. They may handle the crime scene differently. You know, if you could have your people go in there and create one and do it, something like that, and you could give it to your deputies and put on, say, no, this is how we want you to do it when you get there. Don't just get it under control until the investigators can get there. You know, just teach people about stuff like that. I think that's better than sitting at a table and listening to someone talk to you and tell you. You would be in it, doing it, something like that. Training's always, we have to go through a lot of times. You know, you have to go through training. We have to go through training. That's an issue that I would like to see addressed right there. More practical training, more realistic training. But, you know, there again, we have the financial restraints on that.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590. Talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant. Sheriff Bryant was in law enforcement since 1988. Started as a part-time dispatcher, worked his way up the system. 4 years, municipal officer in the city of Hayti. And Sheriff, how long were you a road deputy?
I was a road deputy for 4 years under Jack Davis. I was a street officer for 4 years in Hayti, and then I became chief deputy. But, you know, during the first few years, we just had like 5 deputies. I would work night shifts, answer calls. Excuse me. And then I got to where I just primarily took care of the court system and stuff. It's an important thing for a sheriff to maintain a good relationship with his judges. I've always tried to do that. I think that's important. I do, especially the circuit judge. And we have good judges, you know, and I've always I always place an emphasis on working well with the court system and the prosecutor and the attorneys.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Joe Bryant, the sheriff of Pima County, the chief law enforcement officer in Pima County. And Sheriff, a lot of people don't realize that in addition to handling all crime and investigations in the county, you're also, people, we've talked about this, you're in charge of the jail. So you have to also monitor all the people who are incarcerated, all the people who are brought in for whatever reason and booked and then released or bonded and things of that nature. You're also in charge of the dispatching.
No, well,
let's talk about the dispatching then. Talk a little bit about the dispatching for me.
Actually, the emergency services director is in charge of the dispatchers. It's in our office, but he is in charge of that. He hires them and gets them all their equipment and everything and does all that. So I really don't have to deal with that aspect of it. Also, the sheriff's office is responsible for serving all of what we call civil process. Summonses to come to court, subpoenas to come to court, lawsuits. We have to seize property, you know, serve executions on accounts, bank accounts, and someone loses a case in civil court.
And one thing that people don't realize is probably the most dangerous thing you do in a civil aspect is you also serve the executions whenever individuals are removed from their house as a result of evictions. Correct?
We do. We keep the peace if they do that. If someone has to be removed from their land like a farmer, we would have to serve them with papers to do that. Of course, we never have had issues of that, you know, to speak of.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pima County, the chief law enforcement officer of Pima County. And Sheriff, you know, we talked a little bit about the servicing paper. But one thing you have to do is provide security for the court system, and you also have to work with the judges in regards to jury trials, court appearances, getting individuals transported to and from the Department of Corrections. Also, and I know people are gonna say, why do we do this when we have to bring people back from the Department of Corrections to finish up cases or to have other hearings? So, I mean, it's almost like you're handling 5 or 6 jobs under one umbrella, correct?
We do. The sheriff is responsible for that. We are security for the court system. Bailiff, we provide the bailiffs for the court system. If someone's sentenced to the Department of Corrections, we have to transport them to the Department of Corrections. If someone has to come back for a trial or a hearing, there will be a writ, and we will have to go get them wherever they are and bring them back for their hearing or for their trial. There's a lot of facets to the sheriff's office that maybe people don't know that we have to do that. We are the custodian of all the warrants that are issued in Pemmican County, be they for speeding or murder. Up to that, we have probably a couple thousand warrants. Some of them are old that people were never arrested or caught, from murder to bad checks or whatever, So, but we still have to maintain custody of them.
And also, Sheriff, one thing that we haven't talked about, not only do you have to do all these duties, you also have to be basically the chief financial officer for the sheriff's office, correct?
Well, I ask for a budget, I put in what I want, and the county commission decides how much I actually do get. And then it costs a lot of money to run the sheriff's office, and I have to sign off on the disbursement request to the county for feeding the inmates, for medical for the inmates, for equipment repairs, for tires for vehicles getting serviced, buying ammunition for us to practice with, weapons, everything. Everything comes to me, and I have to look at it and sign off on it before it gets sent over there.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant from Pemmican County, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pemmican County, talking about the extensive amount of duties that the sheriff has, from running the jail, process servers, for the civil side, security for the court system, also getting prisoners to and from all their court appearances, and that's almost a full-time job in itself, Sheriff, is just managing the court system. I mean, we have 3 judges over in that circuit, 1 associate new manager, 4, I'm sorry, 2 associates in Pemmican County, and the circuit judge who does both counties. So you could be having court just about 3 or 4 days a week. Is that correct?
Yeah, we pretty much do have now. And sometimes during what we call law day, first and third Tuesdays of every month, we have had sometimes over 40 inmates we have to take to court. Of course, we can't take them all at once. We just have to take them in shifts there. So, yeah, the court system is a big, busy responsibility that the sheriff's office has. I have a jail administrator, Nikita Brower, and she's excellent.
Absolutely. And I was going to talk about Nikita. Nikita, was she a dispatcher at one time?
No, she was a jailer.
A jailer. Okay.
She's actually a certified deputy now. She went to training last year, and in about 4 months, I think they have to go through now, and she got that, and she came back, and I made her jail administrator, and she does an excellent job. She's very good.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pemmican County. And that jail administrator job, Sheriff, is constantly dealing with all of the inmates' requests for grievances, for medical issues, for making sure that their family gets visits if you have visiting hours, setting up any kind of meetings with the attorneys and the inmates. That job is probably, it's one of those jobs where a lot of people don't know about it, but if you don't have someone who's qualified and very good in that position, it can turn into a real nightmare, can't it?
You are exactly right, and that's why I say Nikita is very good at it. You may have a medical emergency with an inmate in the middle of the night, and, you have to take them to the hospital. But like I say, I don't. Of course, I do worry about what goes on, but with Nikita in place, she handles things very well.
And, Sheriff, we talked a little bit of this earlier, but I think we need to mention them. You talked about your investigators. Obviously, is it Lieutenant Michael Coleman?
Captain. Lieutenant Torrance Akins.
Are those your two investigators right now?
Yes.
And they both do an outstanding job. Obviously, your chief deputy, Josh Bost.
Yes.
Josh was also the jail administrator prior to Nikita. Is that correct?
He was, yes.
Where do you see the issue as far as dealing with money in Pemiscot County? How are we going to get the situation to where we need to be in regards to making sure that the deputies are paid what they need to be paid? Is there an answer?
Well, we're a small rural county. Agriculture is our main industry. I'm not sure about Dunklin County, but in Pemiscot County, that's our main industry. I understand that's not looking too good this year, so I don't know. But they are opening some more stations up in Hayti now. There's a company that's coming there, and maybe that will help us some. We're back to the issue of marijuana being legalized. The 2 stores down on the south end of the county that they are open now and producing, and they may produce a good amount of revenue for the county. So that's something we'll have to look at. I may be to the point where I would have to sacrifice a position or two and divvy that money among the rest of the deputies that are there. I hate to have to do that, but I'm just trying to come up with ideas that I can to that would be more money, not more money coming in, but more money that could be divvied up another way like that. But I'm always trying to think of some way to do that, but I don't know how to get the tax base up in the county. The industry would help, but we don't have a lot of that here. We don't, I don't know if Dunklin County has a lot of that.
And again, we're welcome to the booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking about some of the struggles of law enforcement, obviously, and that's the money issue. These officers who should be paid well more than they are, and we're very thankful for their service. And Sheriff, I didn't even mention this. First of all, thank you for your service in the United States Navy. I greatly appreciate that. I did not realize you were in the Navy, but for those who have served, we truly appreciate you doing that. Sheriff, what are you going to look at? And again, I guess I could ask, you've been in law enforcement a long time. Do you have another 20 years left in you as sheriff?
I don't think so. I'm 61 now. I don't think I'll make it another 20 years in this.
And not to try to paint you into a box or anything. Do you have some plans for what you want to do down the road when you're not sheriff anymore?
No, I want to retire. Well, I would like to have a job somewhere doing something to keep me busy. My dad retired. My dad worked for the Corps of Engineers for 30 years. He retired early at 55. He passed away at 74. But he worked a little while, and then he just quit working. And I think he just started. I think if you need something to do to just keep you moving, not necessarily anything strenuous, but just something to keep you going. And my dad didn't do that. And he's always a big, healthy man, but he didn't keep himself going.
And Sheriff, we didn't really talk about this, but tell us a little bit about the family. What's going on with Sheriff Joe Bryant and the family?
Well, I've been married for 3,670. Nah, I'm just kidding. It just seems like over 37 years now. I have a daughter who lives in the Nashville area. I have 3 grandchildren. Matter of fact, Nora, my oldest, she'll be 5. Going to her party this Saturday. Elias is 3, and Andrew's just a few months old now. So I got three pretty great grandkids. And maybe someday, if I could retire, maybe move closer to them. Just seeing how things work out there.
And again, we're welcome to the booth with Aaron Todd on KDX AM 1590. We're winding down with Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pemiscot County. And Sheriff, one thing that I want the listeners to know is while we've been talking, you've always had a very calm demeanor in the entire time we've been talking. I've never seen you get upset in any kind of situation. We've had some situations in courtrooms that were kind of touch and go. We've had a lot of issues with inmates acting out of character and things of that nature. But I've never seen you really get too high or too low. How do you maintain that demeanor? You need to teach me that.
I couldn't always do that. When I was younger, I was pretty calm, but when I snapped, I snapped. I had my feel, and I let everybody around me know it. I've learned to. I got that under control now. Like I say, people are what they are, and they do what they do. You just, like I say, when I was younger, I was more hard nosed as a law enforcement officer. Now I look out in the audience at the courtroom and I say, "Thank you, Lord," because I could have took that wrong turn myself. So it makes you a little more soft-hearted when you look out there and see that out of people.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pembroke County. And Sheriff, you talked a lot about your grandkids, and you said you had 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they live in the Nashville area?
Yes, they do. They live over there. My daughter, when she left to go to college, she never came home again. She went to UCA in Arkansas, and she left there and got a job in Louisville, Kentucky. She got married and moved to the Nashville area, and she just, we always encouraged her, look, there's life outside of Pembroke County. Go give it a whirl. If it don't work, you're welcome to come back here, but don't strap yourself down here. Just give it a go, and she did, and she's got a pretty good job. And
outstanding. And that's some advice my parents gave me. It was like, hey, if you want to come back here, you're more than welcome. But there's a big world out there. Go out there. You may like it, you may not. I went to Oklahoma City for a while. I lived in Carbondale. I lived in I went to Oxford, to Ole Miss. I kind of traveled around a little bit and things of that nature. So that's some good advice. If you can, just kind of see the world, see a little bit, of what's going outside of this area, and then decide what you want to do. Sheriff, one thing we haven't talked about, you have been elected to other positions other than sheriff too, correct?
I served as a school board member for Delta C7 for 12 years.
And I'm assuming those 12 years you got more complaints in those 12 years than the entire time you've been sheriff or chief deputy, correct?
I did get a lot of them, but people just have to understand there's only so many ways you can slice the pie now. And some of that was just dislike for people and whatever. I ain't gonna deal with that. I got to where some people, I'd go to a basketball. My daughter was a cheerleader, and I'd go to the games. I'd go stand over in the corners instead of sitting up in the bleachers. Just so I'd have some peace.
I would say that your calm demeanor was probably challenged for the 12 years that you were on the school board.
No, not really. I just had people complain about things. I complained about one thing at a board meeting. They built that new gym during, and they put an air conditioner in it. And at one of my first board meetings, I said, I tell you what, I'm tired of getting my butt kicked every time I go on these games over here for this gym being so hot. Can we do something about that? And they did. We got that done. Not because of me, but I said, man, they're tearing me up over this, man. I know they're tearing y'all up too. Can we do something about this? And we finally did do that. REA was very good to us. It had to be rewired for the type, and a guy that worked there came and said, I'll take care of that for you. So they were very good to us over that.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pembroke County. And Sheriff, you indicated is there some openings if someone's interested in applying for a job at the Pembroke County Sheriff's Office? How would we do that, and could we do that?
You can come get an application. We can get you one at the front window and fill that out and send it in. Yes, jail staff, of course, road deputies. Fill out the application and just put a resume with it if you want to, and send it in, and we'll consider it. We try to be as picky as we can. We want to get the best people that we can, but try to stay away from that. The warm body thing you hear. I try to stay away from that if I can.
And sometimes, Sheriff, it's almost better to have an opening or two and just having somebody stand there filling the spot, correct?
It is. I'm not going to get in a great big hurry about it. I want to try to get the best person I can to put in the positions that we have.
And again, Sheriff, I know that I tell you this all the time, but that speech at the Lincoln Days when your statement was, "I'll be honest, I'll be fair." I mean, that's how you have been every day since you've been sheriff. That's how you were every day was you're the chief deputy. And I think it kind of symbolizes what the actual motto of the Pembroke County Sheriff's Office is now. We're going to be honest and we're going to be fair. So I and that all stems from the top. Again, Tommy Greenwell, I respected Tommy Greenwell, a great sheriff. I think that you are also doing a great job as sheriff, and I'm not just saying that because you're here. Like we said, we've always had a great relationship. I've had some tough cases that we disagreed upon things, but one thing that we did was we always put aside our opinions about it, and we were staying friends, I hope. So that's why I respect you greatly for that, Sheriff. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the listeners with before we kind of sign off today?
Well, talking about like you and I and all the other attorneys, I try to get along well with all of them, and I generally do. And we talked about the court system and stuff earlier. I want people to understand there is a system in place. It starts when we get a call in law enforcement, take a report, we submit it to the prosecuting attorneys. It's more than just a report, but just generally speaking. And actually, the prosecuting attorney decides yay or nay. I can't do that. I can't get this case to go, or yes, or, and then when he does, it goes to the court system, and then the process begins. It is a process to go through. I know it's aggravating to people, but you have to understand that's the system we got, and it's a pretty good system. I mean, if you go to North Korea, you don't get that system. You don't get that. You don't get your day in court. You don't get your say. So, people. I want people to understand that. And the people know that there are people out here breaking the law, and sometimes they'll come to us and, they're doing this. Well, we do know that. We understand. But, again, it's a process to do that because the Constitution, you better be thankful you got a Constitution because you don't want us to have that kind of power. And anyway, I appreciate you. Have you had Nick Darter on here yet?
I have had Sheriff Darter on here. He's been on here. It's very unique for us after 20 plus years to have two new sheriffs in Pembroke and Dunklin County at the same time. But I think, we're both in good hands. Sheriff Hefner up there in Stoddard County, he's just going to hold on forever. He's not going to pass the torch quite yet.
He's been there a while. He is a fine man. Sheriff Hefner is a good man. I like and respect him a great deal. He is a good human being. He's a smart man, too. I like him. Everybody don't. I understand he's a sheriff, but I like him a lot. He's a good man.
And on behalf of Sheriff Joe Bryant, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Pembroke County, and my producer, Misty Hankins, my executive producer, Evan Todd, I'd like to thank you for making us part of your day. I hope you have a great afternoon and a better tomorrow.